Minisode, Minisode, Minisode.
It's a Minisode.
It's a Minisode.
It's not a long episode because it's
a
Minisode.
Hey everyone, it's Carly here, back with a little something extra, a Minisode. I haven't done one for a while, but I felt compelled to get my thoughts out about The Devil Wears Prada now that the sequel just came out. There's a lot to say around the treatment of women and fashion world fuckery and the insane way we view and discuss bodies. All of it is wrapped up in gendered expectations, so I thought I'd revisit the original. Before I dive in, I do want to make mention of the fact that I am no longer on Threads because for some unknown reason, my account was suspended and it's probably not going to come back. And I only mention that because it is the main way that I promoted this podcast, and I quite frankly no longer see social media platforms as like a sustainable way, or as a way to sustain visibility, since they demolish people's hard work on a whim and because their AI sucks. So all of that is to say that any support that you show gender pop has become even more important. And you can do that by listening, subscribing, and spreading the love by word of mouth. The word of mouth still makes a big difference. So yeah, you can always see the link tree in the episode notes for everything you would need to do so. All right, enough yapping. Let's get Read to Filth by Miranda Priestley. All right, Minisode Express is chugging along. I'm excited to do another mini episode. So, as the intro said, I was really interested in revisiting The Devil Wears Prada, especially so many years on, because I was quite young when the original one came out. And I was still kind of in that phase where anything that was like remotely girly or like extremely femme coded, I sort of resisted or side eyed. But I did see it, and I actually did enjoy it. And over the years, I've come to like it as a film more. But I hadn't seen it in a very long time, and of course, being inundated with all of the promo for the sequel, really made me want to like remind myself what was actually in that movie. It gets like memeified and quoted and everything so much that started to kind of supplant my memory of what the movie actually is. So yeah, this is just going to be, my minisodes are a little more off the cuff. I'm a little more loosey goosey with it. It's not as like thoroughly researched most of the time. Well, at least especially for this, it'll be just a little more personal. I'll probably get a little more vulnerable considering what some of the themes are of this movie and how they're represented. So yeah, with all that said, I'll just get into it. I was really just going to kind of hit a few main points that stuck out to me or that kind of hit me the most while I was watching it. And that first one being kind of women holding powerful positions. Obviously, Miranda Priestley, the character Meryl Streep plays, is telegraphed. I mean, not even just telegraphed. It's like they straight up just call her a dragon lady at a couple points. And the film goes out of its way to show its audience that everyone is just like scared of her, walking on eggshells around her, that she is downright abusive and manipulative at times. You know, the very first scene with her is everyone in the office freaking out that she's at the office, and they're trying to avoid her or trying to be on their best behavior in front of her, and everyone's just desperate for approval. I mean, a lot of that is just like the power dynamic of the fact that she is the big boss lady. So like your livelihood, your reputation, your money is in her hands. So like she better like you, or you're kind of going to be out on your ass. But it's very interesting to see a movie where that is dominated by women, and it's also the thing I was kind of impressed by. It was that even though Miranda's terrible, it's like it's nice seeing a movie that is heavily populated with female characters, and the antagonist is an asshole is like a woman that's unafraid to kind of be ugly. And like they do kind of overdo it. Like I found the relationship the movie has with Miranda and the way that they chose to present her to the audience in this kind of ebb and flow, because like I really liked, we obviously do have some points in the movie where they try to humanize her. You kind of see the person behind this mask, but it never lasts long. And you, I really really enjoyed. I think like one of my favorite bits of this that I enjoyed this time around was near the very end when um, she reveals to Andy, Anne Hathaway's character, that she's getting yet another divorce, and she sees that as such a failure in her life. And then she's also talking about she worries about how that's going to affect her kids and everything. And obviously, it's an extremely vulnerable moment. You know, she's allowing herself to be exposed to someone else in a way that, you know, she doesn't often. Um, and you'd like to think, wow, she's scoring sympathy points there. Wow, she really trusts Andy as someone in her life there. She's making progress, blah, 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 blah. Only for like 5 minutes later, you know, we get that scene at the very, very end where they're in the car going to the fashion show, and she tells Andy that she sees a lot of herself in her and that everyone wants to be them. And you see that like she's she hasn't changed, she hasn't learned, she hasn't grown. She's always going to like be this way. And that almost all that sympathy you felt just a few seconds ago is already being portrayed to lean. And I kind of really appreciated that they gave us that sort of emotional whiplash with her. um it would have been so easy to just land the plane on the humanizing moment and really strive again to make a female character likable or redeemable in some way. But they were like, no, this is the person that she is. And it obviously also serves the main character of Andy to have that really triumphant moment of walking away, which I found quite powerful this time around, really. Um, and we also see like Miranda kind of smirk because she's like, good for her. Like she's actually impressed with her decision to walk away from that and to hold her head higher than the industry, or at least the people she was working with were um I mean, yeah, she kind of lived up to her own values and morals at the end of the day and had the courage of her conviction, and that's not something a lot of people can say, and certainly in that industry, at least the way that we've been shown it through these character and their world, um, that a lot of people are sacrificing and compromising themselves, especially for Miranda, that even Miranda's compromising herself to maintain this status quo and this sense of power, the way that she, you know, gets that other woman the job with that one fashion designer so she can keep her job, and she's like destroying her best friend Stanley Tucci's. Well, I don't, does she even have best friends? That's not how she sees anyone. But the way that she manipulates Andy into going to Paris and then having to tell Emily, I found was particularly disgusting move of hers. But I did find some cool quotes about this. I did say I didn't do a ton of research. I didn't, but I wanted to have a little extra something to back me up while I'm talking about this. And I came across this kind of academic paper by Julia A. Spiker, who's a professor at the University of Akron. Um, and she has a quote that says, the movie presents a view that women like Miranda do not have to be nice when using power. Wolf is a researcher in women and especially like the power dynamics in workplaces. Wolf identifies the dragon of niceness as a problem for women. According to Wolf, women shy away from expressing power because they want to be perceived as being nice, which is not a new thought. It is a thought that I think a lot of people express nowadays, both in real life and in the way that we see women. You know, there's often always that conversation around likability. The most recent example, at least within pop culture, I can think of is Ray Seahorn's character in Pluribus, Carol. There was a lot of hullabaloo around her character when that show came out about her being so unlikable that people just like couldn't watch the show and couldn't stomach it anymore. And it was funny because I saw all of that before I actually got to watch the show. And when I started watching it, I was like, I did not understand where that was coming from at all. It seemed very unwarranted to me. I'm not saying it's because she's likable, but I think some of the things that she does are very reasonable responses to a very insane and stressful world shattering event that she's having to deal with. She is in grief. She is experiencing a lot of loss, a lot of trauma, a lot of confusion, a lot of isolation, some of it purposeful, some of it is just kind of a reflex to coping with, I mean, like a big of it is her coping with things. And yeah, she pushes back on it, and that makes her a bitch and an asshole and antagonistic at sometimes. But that doesn't mean that she's not an interesting character, that she's not compelling, that Ray Seahorn isn't doing fantastic work on that show, that she doesn't if they must be likable, I do think she has moments that are at least relatable or funny or again compelling enough that it made me want to keep up with the character and the story. But anyways, just a quick example of how that still rears its head in our discussions around female characters, especially when they take center stage in a story. Um, and yeah, so there's just a few other quotes from Julia A. Spiker that I jotted down because I thought they were really interesting. And one says, in the movie, women can be portrayed as silly because the setting is the world of fashion, while at the same time, Miranda can be portrayed as all powerful. And this was kind of off the back of wanting to have your cake and eat it too, in that, like, we want, on one hand, or the contradictory nature, sort of the fashion world, especially through Andy, is presented as being very unserious and unhinged when she first steps into it. But the people around her take it extremely seriously. They treat it like it's life or death. And it reminds me of that great Cerulean Blue monologue that Miranda has. And I made a note when I was watching it that monologue still is so good. I think it's, especially for someone, I feel so personally attacked by it because I'm someone that's never really cared about fashion. I am someone that has thought of the fashion as being silly and stupid, and I don't understand it. I mean, I appreciate it now more than I used to. I can see that it is an art form. It is a legitimate creative passion. Some people do great work with it and everything. It won't ever be like something that I find myself particularly into or again understand that much, to be honest. But I definitely don't think I'm like so snobby contrarian against it as I used to kind of be. Again, which is the difference between little me watching this and adult me watching it now. But yeah, so for someone who doesn't really think about my clothes or doesn't think that I'm a part of that world, to have that monologue, where Miranda kind of explains to Andy how the shirt and the color that she's wearing has been passed down from a long line of fashion designers in the world and trends, and how that all it trickles down into the masses eventually. So these choices are being made for you. It's a bit of a a psyop moment. She's like, whether you realize it or not, the clothes that you're wearing are a part of these decisions that we're making and about this world that you think is so stupid and that you're undervaluing or underestimating constantly. So yeah, I think let's see. It takes women away from important things such as meeting the needs of others, boyfriend, friend, family. So this was kind of describing, this is also from Julia A. Spiker, how the wonky view of the working woman, and how when Andy starts getting even more involved and really committed to the work that she's doing, that it's so negatively portrayed about, like, we see how her boyfriend reacts to that, we see how her family reacts to that, we see how her friends react to that, and it's all done in like a negative light. They give her a lot of shit for it. They give her a lot of judgment. And over the years, a lot of people have come to reassess it. They're like, the boyfriend's truly the vision. the vision, the villain, excuse me, and that her friends are just like unreasonable. And I mean, I agree for the most part. Like, you know, I sort of, on certain points, I see where they're coming from. You know, this person that they love and have has been in their life for a while is changing, or is getting into things that they previously hadn't been. And it is true that like so much of her time is taken up, and it's taken up by someone that is very disrespectful of her. So like there is a conversation to be had there about like, is this really what you want to be subjected to day after day, and how is this affecting your well-being? But it's never really often framed that way. It's often like what they're doing to that, like what she's doing to them, and how they don't like how she is, and like they're just very unaccepting, very unempathetic, because like she is going through it too. It's not like because she's so into this job, it doesn't mean she's not having a hard time with it. But they never, to my recollection anyways, never really stopped to consider her side of it. And I mean, she expresses how terrible Miranda is and everything, but like, I don't know, her boyfriend and her friends are just like, you're not who I thought you were, and you're becoming someone else, and you're never here, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, again, there are ways you can have those conversations where it's much more sympathetic and empathetic, and it's kind of a two-way street thing going on of like, this is what I'm struggling with, and how are you struggling with, and how can we kind of merge those things to come to some middle ground or understanding between what we're both going through. But instead, they just kind of like give her crap over and over again and push her away and isolate her further. It does kind of have this message of saying that um like the workforce has taken women away from the kind of domestic and emotional labor that we're expected to kind of be doing and carrying at all times, or saying that these things are more important than those things. Like it's kind of making a distinction or a hierarchy with them. um yeah, so I that quote kind of stood out to me. Also with the power thing, like going back to the moments that Miranda was humanized, like a moment that really stood out to me was when when Andy is dropping off like the runway book for the first time and accidentally walks in on Miranda having a fight with her husband. This is obviously pre-divorce, and the husband's kind of reaming into her, and she's like, I think it's because he's backing out of going to something, and she's like, "You can't. People are expecting you to go." And he's given her the business, and she looks so like sad and defeated. And we are seeing Miranda basically emasculated by her husband. So it is a bit of a gender swap in that sense of where Miranda is very much in the role that we typically see men in. And so when we see someone having any sort of power over her or humbling of her, it's very shocking and impactful. And it's like, whoa, she does have human moments, or she isn't in charge of everyone, and she isn't like this all of the time, and that it's not necessarily realistic to be like that all the time. And it also obviously gives context for why she kind of kicks back into that mode so frequently, especially at the end, with the very end that I explained just a little bit ago. Um, the next point I want to get to is probably what's going to take up the chunk of this episode, because it's the one that matters to me most, and I think it's the thing that the film. I think it's one of the biggest takeaways that anyone can get from the film, and it's obviously been referred to a lot over the years. But that's its portrayal of body image, and it's extremely problematic and upsetting, and it was a bit triggering for me. Um, we all know the early 2000s was a terrible time for women in body image, and the pendulum is unfortunately kind of swinging back towards all of that. And so to watch that in this current climate, knowing all of that, it was really yeah, just really fucking sad. And I'm a bigger gal. I'm fat. I've always been fat. I went on my diet. I went on my diet. I went on my very first diet at the ripe old age of 11. And for me, that was prepubescent. um, and I fluctuated. I lost weight on that. I've gained it back. I've lost some again. I've gained it back. I've been on a really terrible, extreme like unhealthy journey with it, like a lot of people have, and it's been that way since I've obviously been very young. I mean, I knew something was quote unquote wrong with me um, way before 11 years old. But looking back on that now, I find it very problematic that you would put an 11-year-old on a diet. But anyways, that is for my therapist. But no, but truly, like, as someone that's fat, as someone that would, it has typically been shunned by the fashion world as not having a desirable body or a body that's good enough for fashion and all of this stuff. The portrayal of that in this is probably very realistic, but it's also like very disheartening. And it's interesting now because it's like I don't know if I was. I'm sure people were making these points when it came out, but I was just too young to kind of be clued into the discussion that there were the discourse that was going on about it. Um, I feel like a lot of it is used in a comedic way or even in an earnest way. That now it's just like ooh, and in my notes I have in all caps, Anne Hathaway is not fat in this movie, and that's to say even if she were would not be a problem, completely fine. We need to have more fat main characters, and especially where their fatness is not even brought up, is not even a point in the story. But this movie goes out of its way to tell us that she is seen as fat. She is seen as having a disgusting body type to the people in this kind of industry. And just all throughout this, and it's like size 6, like it gets reiterated a lot in these kind of body conversations, but the average size of woman, at least in the US, is between 14 and 16. So a size 6 is obviously considerably lesser than that. Is skinny. I mean, Anne Hathaway is skinny in this movie. She is skinny in this movie. At the start, in the middle, at the end, at all times. I've never seen Anne Hathaway fat ever. And especially in this movie, she is not. And it's just like it's all about how women are expected to shrink themselves. We see this in how they act with Miranda, that we see this in their body size. We see this in the eating habits. uh Although I will say like an onion bagel is a very strong choice for when you have an interview. I will give them that's like maybe not just on a breath level. um but also like the forced competition among women, and that everything in this movie, and you can extrapolate that out into the real world as well, is run on insecurity. I mean, it's been pointed out that the beauty industry, the fitness industry, the fashion industry, all of these things would like just crumble and collapse in an instant if we didn't maintain kind of a base level of people being insecure, especially women. Keep telling them there's something wrong with them, there's off about them, they need to do this next diet, they need to do this next procedure, whatever it is, they need this next piece of clothing. And again, it is often about shrinking yourself, making yourself more palatable to patriarchy. um, and it also just, it is a cautionary, I did end up seeing it as cautionary tale of self-respect, right? With Andy walking away, she keeps coming up against these obstacles that are challenging how much she really loves herself and how much she thinks she deserves and how much she values herself and what she believes in. And she goes through a lot of different like peaks and valleys with that. Sometimes she thinks she is finding self-respect by fully giving herself over to this job, and then obviously at the end she finds that like no, walking away from it is the ultimate self-respect. Um, and it's just like, I don't know, it's funny to me that this is the second movie where we see Anne Hathaway get a makeover, the first one being The Princess Diaries. And it's just so fucking wild that Hollywood was really trying to convince us that she was like ugly and fat and undesirable and like not like other girls and all that and it's just like no, she's always been, I think, very pretty, very conventionally appealing, like it's she's such an example of how unrealistic and how out of touch like Hollywood's understanding of like what a real human is like. Oh, I mean, and the biggest moment about the body stuff in this is, like, the worst line about it is, Emily Blunt's character, also named Emily, gets sick, and I believe Andy at one point says, "You look great though," and she just says, "I'm one stomach flew away from my goal weight," and I wanted to retch when I heard that, because it's just like it. I feel like it really sums up our entire attitude around beauty and the standards around that. Is that being skinny, being seen as beautiful, is more important than anything else. It's more important than your relationships. It's more important than your health. It's more important than, feeling like a strong individual that can take on whatever life gives you. I just found that to be really upsetting. And I found another quote here. It's from Rebecca Nagel for Gender Gazette. And it says, "Women are still judged for their size, their clothing, and their conformity to beauty standards, especially in male-dominated or image-driven industries." And it's kind of just like, no matter what women do, it always kind of comes back to that. And we see a lot of how Andy gets contrasted, like the way that she eats, the way that she's getting dressed for the day, even coming down to the transportation she takes. I found that so fucking bizarre, because they do this big compare and contrast in the beginning, between like her getting ready and like all these seemingly supermodels getting ready or whatever, or quote unquote more acceptable looking women, I guess. I don't know. And I don't know if it was trying to make a point of the showing the lengths women have to go to just to be able to like walk outside and be presentable. And that like we're supposed to judge Andy for not doing those. I don't know. I don't know if it's trying to make a commentary about all the work they're doing to make that happen. But like the last part of it is like they're taking private cars and having chauffeurs and stuff, and then she's taking the subway, and I'm like, since when is taking the subway? What? I was like, what? This is like obviously classism too. A lot of this comes down to classism. It always, that's the biggest solidarity people kind of unify around more than anything else. It always comes down to classism, and I just thought like the fact that they were showing her taking the subway was somehow a part of showing that she's lesser than or whatever. I was like, that's so bizarre. It's completely normal to take the subway. Millions of people do it. It's actually a better way to get around. I mean, I'm a big champion of public transportation. I hate cars. So, I just, that kind of cracked me up in a kind of a weird, dark way. And also Rebecca Nagel gets to that point where she says, "This isn't just a quirky setup. It's a visual map of the class and cultural divide Andy is about to enter. Fashion isn't just clothing in this world. It's identity, status, and power." I'm someone that will probably always be fat. I think I'll always be seen as lesser than by some people, less worthy. I've struggled with, feeling lovable and wanted because of that. I do a lot of work on it. I've made progress on it. I'm in a better headspace about it now than I used to be. But, we still keep living in this world that keeps beating me over the head with how bad it is that my body looks like that. And so, when we have stories like this that kind of reinforce that, it really is just kicking people while they're down. I'm sure the creators around this have spoken a lot about it, and maybe, it was very intentional, and they're very like we're this movie is campy. It is satirical to an extent. I just like anything that comes out in the early 2000s. I wonder how self-aware it is. But I do think there's enough kind of earnestness and sincerity in this that it's easy to just take that lesson away of just like fat is bad again. Even though I'm sure a lot of the people that made this don't subscribe to that, but they do play into that, because like all of the main players in this that I know about are skinny people. But I know that like there's been some headlines about the sequel, and that like Anne Hathaway mandated that they have more body inclusivity and sizes shown. It remains to be seen if that, like how that actually showed up. Because again, as we've seen in this movie, where people think a size 6 is fat, is body inclusivity just like having someone that has like big hips but still a really flat stomach, or just happens to have big boobs, or has really muscly thighs but are still otherwise like very conventionally upholding those beauty standards or whatever. Right? I haven't seen it yet, so I don't really have thoughts on whether the size inclusivity really held up its end of the deal. Um, but if it's true that Anne Hathaway asked for that and tried to champion that, um, like ultimately she's not the one that's in charge of hiring, so it's like it might be the way that they interpreted what she's saying. Who knows? But I do appreciate that there was at least the sentiment of it. We should be further along in the conversation than just sentiment, but um, I think if you can take someone that's as successful as she is, as famous as she is, therefore has as much of a platform as she is, and it's an attempt at being a skinny an ally to fat people, and trying to hope at least make some stink about there needing to be more space for people of different sizes. I think that's a really cool thing, and I hope it could just be a given going forward. But um, until we have a rom-com that's led by a fat woman and her fatness is never even a part of it, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of a thing. Anyways, I'm gonna start wrapping this up. The biggest takeaway I had is like good change versus bad change in this movie. Her friends aren't willing to let her change. You gotta let people change. They won't always be who they were when you met them. Humans just aren't like that. If you're going to know someone 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you're going to change, they're going to change, whether it's a friendship, a romantic relationship, a colleague, a family member. Like, your first impression is impactful even beyond what we realize, I think, because it's like people kind of crystallize you. They set you in amber and think that that's like the way that they met you, or the way that they got to know you is the way that you're always going to be, or the way you always have to be. And like if you move any inch outside of that box, some people can kind of take offense to it and can be weird about it. And we see that with the way her boyfriend treats her and the way that her friends treat her. Like they can't accept that she might be into different things as she gets older. She might, want to do this that she previously didn't, or it's like, it's not, not every, because like I think this is well illustrated by the fact that when we see her at the end, when she's completely away from Rand and all that stuff, like she's still fashionable, she's still stylish when we see her, but it's in her own way. So it's not like, I think that's kind of an indication that the way that she was in that work wasn't completely serving Miranda and serving the other people around. Like she did learn about herself. She did grow and mature through that process and gain a lot of experience and knowledge about her own self, because she didn't just go back to being who she was before she got hired at Runway. She's another version of herself. She's another evolved tier because she's older again and she's grown. She's had these experiences and she's older, and I like that we see the residual of that and the fact that she's still, yeah, she still looks good. She's still stylish, but it's in her own way now. And I've struggled with this throughout my life too, where people think I'm one thing because that's who they met me as, and I'm no longer like that as much, or I introduce other things. Life is a lot about subtracting and adding, and we're always constantly figuring ourselves out. We're always a work in progress. And people who don't really understand that or accept that or can go on that journey with you, I don't think are true friends and are not people you should like trust or let have any sort of say in your life or whatever. Again, it's the good change versus bad change, where we see Miranda having those moments of humanity and we think that she could be on the verge of changing, and she refuses to. So I think like it's a tale of, like I was saying, good change versus bad change in the form of like Miranda versus Andy, who I think Andy takes the right lessons away from it and Miranda doesn't. And Miranda's significantly older, so she's kind of drawn that line in the sand. But I think it should also be a tale that it's never too late to change your ways or to improve or to want better for yourself or work on yourself or, yeah, create a life that's just truer to you. And I think ultimately that's probably the best and most wholesome takeaway you can have with this movie, or else I would just be at war with its body image fuckery, if not. But yeah, so that's kind of my little mini-sode there for you all. I hope it was fun to listen to. I'm always happy to receive sort of any comments on the listening platforms you use. Um, my inbox is always open. The email is genderpoppod@gmail.com. If you ever want to be a guest, if you ever want to collaborate, that's where you can reach me. Please use that email, genderpoppod@gmail.com. Anyways, yeah, so that's The Devil Wears Prada. Thank you so much for listening. I do hope you enjoyed this little episode. I think it will be interesting to see where the characters have landed 20 years from the original, and to see whether it was warranted to even make a sequel, to be honest. The contrast in eras, if nothing else, will be fascinating. Have we learned anything from how these things are portrayed then versus now? I guess we'll find out. Again, please, please, please consider subscribing if you liked any of the work I've done. The link tree will be in the episode notes, and it contains all the important podcast links. Gender Pop will return later this month with our regular full-sized episode. Trying to think if I should give you a little hint about that. All right, I'll give you some clue words. So your keywords, your clues are potion, duality, and London. I shall say no more. See you all back here soon enough. That's all.